This video is made possible by the support of codenotary.io, blockchain protected authenticity in your DevOps process. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Moshix mainframe channel. This is Moshix, and today we're going to be looking at the Rexx web server. That means a web server, an HTTPD web server written completely in Rexx, running on ZVM, my favorite platform for the last year or so, other than of course ZOS and Linux. And I found this web browser, this web server, sorry, on a web page, and I downloaded it and got it to run. And so today we're going to see from beginning to end where to obtain it, how to run it, and how to configure it. But the most important part is that you can actually write CGI scripts, meaning that they server-based scripts that produce some information and write them in Rexx, and they have some display produced on a browser. So that's just, for instance, this one. So this is a typical example. That's a Rexx script that's running right now on that web server that I just mentioned, and goes and gets some information from ZVM, such as the current load, and displays it on my browser. And I use this by myself personally while I'm traveling, while I'm on the go, to see what's going on with my server when I'm not at home or in my office, to connect to it. So that's a great way to write little things. Or I can check the IPL time. So for instance, this IPL the last time 3 days ago on September 25th, and so we're going to be looking today how to get this all accomplished. So the other day, while I was just browsing the internet on my iPad on one of my jet-lag induced sleepless nights, I came across this webpage which I had seen many times before. Fran Hensler, he is a person who has a P390 card, like the same ones that I have, which I've shown in my previous videos, and on that one he's running ZVM, I think 3.4, so a very old version of ZVM, and he's always said that he will keep this website up and running as long as his cards keep working, and when the cards will stop working, then this web page will stop being served, because this web page itself is being run out of that ZVM. And specifically he mentions here that he has a web server written in Rexx. Let's see if we can find it. He has many great utilities here, so here it is. An HTTPD server for VM by Rick Troth from Houston, Texas. This page is served out with it. So what I did is I downloaded it and installed it on my computer. And I made enough changes that I actually created also a Github repository, just in case Fran Hensler's webpage disappears. Moshix, and let's see if you can find my repository. Where is it? Let's search for GitHub Moshix. Yeah. So here's my page on GitHub, and there is now a new repository I just created 22 hours ago exactly, that contains the whole downloadable of this web page, together with some pretty ready-made example HTML pages such as this one, and also the CGI scripts that I'm invoking here. So you could either obtain it from Fran Hensler if it's still up, but if by the time you watch this video, maybe in a year or 2 or 5 years from now, this page does not respond anymore, if you Google for Fran Hensler and this doesn't come up anymore, then hopefully GitHub is still going to be around, because it's owned by Microsoft. I think Microsoft is going to be around for it's good for another 10 years or so at least. And there you will find a VMARC, VM archive in binary format, ready to upload to your ZVM machine and install it. All you have to do is unpack it, and everything is already contained in it to run it. So I will just today, instead of going this route here, because then you will get something that still needs to be configured, I would urge you to go to my GitHub, and I will point to my GitHub repository from the description below this video. If you open up the description, there's going to be a link to it, and then just download this bad boy here, webserver.vmarc.bin.github. Alright, so download it and put it on your computer. That will be the first step, and all the other steps, how to install and operate, are mentioned here. So let's go one by one the steps to get this up and running. So after you downloaded it, put it on your computer, and now you need to go to your ZVM and go log in as the maintainer, as the main user, which I have somewhere a window here. Okay, so we'll just connect a new terminal. This is running, by the way, on my ZPDT computer, which I purchased from IBM. It's the fastest way to run and the most legal way to run operating systems. So I call it my snorkeling ZVM machine. So we'll log in here. I can make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so I'm now logged in, and of course we need to first thing is to create a service machine to run the web server in, and that's exactly what I'm step number one. Create a G permissioned guest machine for your ZVM, and any version of ZVM with TCP/IP will work from 3.4 up to 7.1, and any other later versions of ZVM in the next few years. This will work. So give it 64 megabytes of RAM and the 30 cylinders or so minidisc as 191, and link to the 592 disk of TCP/IP. Okay, what does it all mean? It's actually very simple. I have here webserver direct. Nope. Okay, webserver direct. So you need something like this. Of course you need to put this in your overall directory file, but this would be just the part that concerns the web server. You create the user, I call it webserver, you can call it whatever you want. Give it a password. 64 megabytes is more than enough, up to 128. Permission G. It needs to have a G permission. And then some, the usual setup that we use here, and we give it access to the CMS disk so that it can IPL CMS, of course. But then this part is the most important part. Link TCP main 592 as 592 with this kind of permissions. Okay, so this is how we link. It needs to see the TCP configuration files for your ZVM, so we'll link to that. There's nothing secret there, so that's not a big problem to link to it. And then the other thing is we need to give it a mini disk called 191 with, I give it 100 cylinders, but 30 is fine. And this is going to be, I have a user volume on my ZPDT, and so I'm going to use that starting from cylinder address 200 for 100 cylinders. But 30 is more than enough. I just gave it 100 because I was doing some development. So once you did that, you run your new directory with this user, and of course you will give it an appropriate password. And so now Bob is your uncle. Let's file it. So of course now the next step would be to format the minidisc for the new service machine. So what we would do in this case here is, let's put this on the side so we can keep referring to it. I think that would be probably the easiest, even though the white background may be very distracting, but let's just do it this way. I don't know why Microsoft or Chrome, or I don't know what it is, tries to always make my browser page be full screen. Anyway, so it says here format the 191 minidisc that we just saw and label it whatever we want. So the way we would do this, because I'm mained here on my ZVM machine on ZPDT. So the way to do it would be, of course, to say link webserver 191, something like that, right? And now we would have access to it. And now the next step would be format 91 as Z, for instance, right? I'm not going to do it now because I already created that and would destroy everything, but you would do this here, and then it would ask you, are you sure? You would say yes, and then the next thing is give it a label, and that's what I'm saying, volume label. You can call it Mickey Mouse or whatever you want to call it. It's only 6 bytes long, 6 characters long, and then once you've done that, it's formatted, and then you would have access to it. So I would do now access 91 as Z, and now we could look into Z, and you would not see any of this because it would be empty because you just formatted it. But what you would do next is first you would copy, I have VMARC module, I have it already installed here on my machine, and so what I would do next is copy file VMARC module A to Z, right? By doing this line here, copy file VMARC module A, assuming you already have it installed on your main, which most people would, because VMARC is absolutely crucial, so everybody has it installed. All you have to do is copy it now over to Z, and so it's going to call it exactly the same way, VMARC module Z. And if you execute it, well, I already have it, so in my case I have to say replace, and then now it's on that new minidisc for the new service machine called webserver. And the next step would be to get this, where is it, from my GitHub repository, get this archive. So you would download it. It's really not that big, you know, you would download it. It's 211 kilobytes. And the next step would be to use send to host with your with your terminal server or FTP, whatever you like, but it's so small, I think uploading it as a terminal transfer would be easiest. Just make sure you have it as binary, and host is at CMS, of course. Upload it as binary and put it in Z. So once you've uploaded it to the Z drive, you can actually just log off from your main user, and we can reconnect, and now we can log in for the first time as webserver, whatever password you gave it. And of course I already have an exec. That will be the next step here. Let's go back. Of course it says that you should put in your own profile, whatever you need to have there. I have this kind of profile. The most important, of course, I have my retrieve, so I can retrieve past commands. I have the colors for my terminal, but the most important part is access the 592 SB. So we need to access the TCP main minidisc S3 SB so that the web server can go and read some configuration files when it starts. That's the only reason. So, but be sure to have the access there, just like I'm doing here. And the next step will be, once you have the profile set up, log in again. So, or just load the profile by writing profile. Okay. And now the next step will be to run VMARC unpack, and then the name of my whatever you uploaded as app, let's say webserver VMARC A. So this would be the command you would type in to unpack, VMARC unpack, the name you uploaded it as, and then run this, and then it will unpack everything that's in there, including the web server and including some Rexx CGI scripts, and of course also some HTML files. So once you've got that done, it will run for, you know, on my ZPT runs a split second, and so then you have this, you have all this stuff. It's about, I want to say maybe 40 files or so are being unpacked. You can, if you want, you can get rid of the VMARC here. So this is what I uploaded it, which of course is the biggest file. You can just delete it if you don't need it anymore. You can just leave it there. If you make mistakes, you can just unpack it again, and that's about it. So that's the installation. Now we did everything that we need to do. So we're now at step 5, And so we did this, and now we can go look for the index HTML file, wherever it is. If you see it, shout. Oh, here it is. The second one. And we can start changing things. If we can also do it like this, and we can call it whatever you want. Welcome home. Okay, so we file it, and the other thing is file list. We need to, the only thing to configure will be what port you want it to listen to. I put in port 8080 because 80 is already, there's something else running on port 80, which is the performance monitor for ZVM, and so I want to, but you can put in any port, especially if it's above 1024, because as you know, the first 1024 ports by consensus or by protocol are restricted ports. But then other than that, you can give it anything. I give it 8080 because I keep that port open from the internet into my server, and then some other self-explaining configuration parameters here. Okay. The type here is as you would have with any web server, so you can just file it. The other thing is that if you want to run any CGI scripts, they need to be listed here in the CGI here. So any CGI script that you want approved for running, you would have to list here. So this is one that we're going to be playing in this video, so I just added it here. So whenever it starts, it checks this file to see which CGI scripts are approved to run. So I already included CMS CGI here. Okay, and then we can look at CMS CGI, which is included as part of this archive here, and that's it. This is my script that's running here. Oops. And we're going to look into this in a second, but let's just remember again how this all looks. How do we start? Once you configure the port, the only thing you need to do is start it with HTTPD. Okay, so once it's running, you can just go to, in our case it's port 80, and my ZPDT is on IP 11, this IP here. So that's it. It just worked, and it tells us that we got the get HTTP, which of course is the get command from our browser, and this is the IP. It knows the IP of this machine, so it says desktop. So yeah, everything worked just fine. And I have this welcome home, which we just changed by hand right now, and this is just an HTML file which is provided, and as I said, some information of what I do, and a link to where you can obtain ZPDT from IBM, which is a very nice way to run mainframe operating systems. If you qualify, you have to go through a qualification process, but it's not hard. And then we can start looking at how do I produce this CGI output on the web browser, right? And of course, the web browser could be connected from anywhere in the internet. So let's see, and to show you that this is really working, if I do here int load, you would see that yes, this is indeed the same machine. My ZPDT only has one processor, which is a little bit, you know, if you have money then go for two processors, but I went the cheap way, but still I can do everything that I'm doing with one processor. I'm working with IBM to maybe obtain a 2 CPU license. Anyway, so this is all working, and now let's go see how this all works. Let's stop the web browser at the web server. So if you HX, as you know, in CMS in ZVM stops the execution of a program. So now we can take this. So you can see here, this is the address of the CGI script. It's called CMS, and then question mark, and then of course the parameter we pass. So this is how we pass parameter to the CGI script, and we can change the word here, and it will execute the CGI script, the CMS CGI script, with a different parameter. And if you remember, I'm not calling them by hand, but I have them configured here. So if you look at the bottom of the screen here, you see right now, about 3 inches below my mouse, you see the IP address, and then CGI bin, and then CMS question mark moderate. If I go here, it's the same thing, CMS, but question mark CP level, which gets the IPL time. And if I go load, it will show the load on the machine because it has CMS question mark load. If you have to just look straight down from where the mouse is right now, you see it at the bottom of the screen. Okay, you can see it now. Okay, if I go, it disappears, it comes up again. You can see that the words change beyond the question mark depending on what we're invoking. And so the script is always the same. And so let's go look at it here on our ZVM machine. So of course it's Rexx, and that's really the beauty of it, that you can write Rexx scripts, CGI scripts in Rexx, because Rexx is such a fun and easy language to learn. And by the way, everything that we're doing here, we could also do in ZOS, because ZOS has the capability to run CGI scripts. So you can see here from ZOS has the can run CGI scripts in Rexx for the web server that's included as part of it. And so everything that we're doing here would work pretty much the same way, with one key difference, which we're going to look into now. So let's go first up, and the way we produce output on the screen is that we have a function called output, which we're going to look at it in a second, and then we output HTML tags to the browser. So this is what the browser will see, and of course you recognize these are just standard HTML tags. So we're giving it a head, then we have a title, and then we have the body, so all of that stuff. Now output is just nothing else than a function that writes into a socket. So it's defined somewhere else. You don't really have to, if you want to make it easy for yourself, you don't have to know much about the output command or function. It's just a way to write into a socket that exists right now between the web server and the web browser, wherever the web browser may be. So then after we've done this, we address, attach to the HTTPD, so we can use that and start to run stuff. Now here is one thing that makes it, that eliminates that make sure that people cannot use this CGI commands to execute any arbitrary commands. So we block any arbitrary commands other than the ones we allow. And then we just make sure that there are some arguments, that we don't pass, just 0 arguments. And then we start. So we check if we're checking for who, for list, because those would be CMS commands, and all the others are actually CP commands. As you know, in ZVM, CMS is the single user operating system where we're in right now, which allows you to do interactive work in the ZVM guest machine. And then the CP is the hypervisor itself, the operating system itself, that will give you, that can tell you what's going on in the system. Such if you want to know all the other guest machines that are running, of course only CP can tell you that, because CMS is a single user operating system, is not aware of any other users. But the CP, the operating system itself, ZVM control program itself, will know. And so by running queue names, you can obtain that result from the, so that will show you what's running, kind of like PS in Linux. I don't know if there's any way to do the same thing in Windows. And then CP level will tell us what is the version. It's like kind of like uname in Linux or Unix, but it also shows you when it was IPL. So it's both uname and it's also uptime. It's the same. Those two answers in one command. And load will just show you the load on the machine. And so I'm separating here in the script. We could also do it differently a little bit. We could do a select, and then otherwise, if it's not any CMS commands, then they have to be CP, and then we could do a function here. But I separated it this way. I mean, maybe not the most elegant way to do it, but it works. Then we set if it's output that comes from CP. I set a much larger font, 28. Why do I do that? So by running output and then those HTML tags, I switch to a much larger font. Why do I do that? Because I'm actually using this CGI script from my mobile phone when I'm traveling. And since when I travel, you know, my browser on my screen is, you know, everything comes out very small. I want to be able to read it without having to enlarge the screen on my iPhone all the time. So I put it in big font from the get-go, so that when I put it into landscape mode, I turn my phone around to landscape, it will perfectly fill the screen for my iPhone, which I think is an iPhone 10 or iPhone X. I don't know, never remember the models anymore. Doesn't matter, but for my screen, this is perfect. So change it to your screen size of your mobile phone, or whatever you want to do with it. And then we check again the same thing. So we check what was the argument that we were provided. If it's names, then do query names. If it's CP level, then query CP level. If it's load, then we do indicate load. And if it's monitor, then we want to do everything at once, which means we query the time, we indicate the load, and then we always have some empty lines there to keep them apart, and then query CP level, and finally query names, so we can see everything that is running. And then for good practice, then of course we need to close the HTML page so that the browser doesn't get confused. Of course, browsers will still close the page if they don't get it, because, you know, they handle those exceptions, but it's always good practice to just close the HTML so the browser won't get confused, especially if you're running inside a browser, how to call those, in the windows inside the browser, and then you exit the CGI script. So that's it, and this is of course all interpreted, but it's still very fast. And so let's start it again, and let's see how this all looks. HTTP, and we can go now here, and if you do monitor everything, that's it. So this is now the last part of the Rexx script that we just saw, that does everything. So first the time, if you remember, then the load, then the CP level, which shows the IPL time, and then what is running on my machine. So if we want to change something, we can just say stop execution, and then X CMS CGI, and, you know, if we want to have the time first, or the time last, maybe that would be a worthwhile change. So we just take this, and put it here. Oops. Let's just take this, and then the empty line before, so it becomes readable. Okay, so now we can delete it here, and we'll still keep the empty line just because maybe it looks good. Okay, so now let's run this, and let's see how this looks. Yeah, so now we have the time here at the bottom, as you can see. Very easy to program. Stupid simple. Another thing you can do is, you know that we have the help menus, right, in ZVM, and you can just put the cursor wherever you want, and then we do, let's, for instance, the query command, right? So now through CGI on Rexx, we can actually every time. Okay, we can do this now from here. So we can do CMS help. See, that's exactly the same thing, but now in HTML. And so I can go here again, and then I can do query. Same thing again. Okay, so that's a very useful way to run scripts on the server, get the output from those scripts and show them in the browser. Very simple way. It's good performance on my ZPDT, and it doesn't really eat that many cycles. Rexx execution on ZVM is very, very fast, and probably faster than on ZOS. And so we can check whatever we need to check here. Isn't that a great way? You can do many other things. I mean, whatever you can think of, you can do with Rexx scripts, because it's so easy to write anything in script in Rexx. So if you wanted to write your own little program, then one good way would be to say copy file CMS CGIA into hello CGIA. Okay, now remember that we need to add this new CGI in the list of CGI scripts that are permitted to run, which is here, htbin file list, this one. So we add here hello CGI. Okay, and now we can start changing this. We can say we can just say something like hello world. Okay, everything else you can just pretty much throw away. I would leave this part in so people cannot execute arbitrary commands. Maybe this also, so you check if you have any arguments. And then this also. Okay, so that would be the very bare minimum. And you could write here now output my first Rexx CGI. If you want to get any execution from your environment, you would call pipe, because that's the pipe. As you know, CMS has pipes, so you can pipe commands kind of like the pipe in Unix, and you could say whatever you want here. I mean, anything you want. So, and then you just start it, and let's see if we have hello. Yep, so that worked first time. Okay, so very, very simple to write your first CGI script in Rexx. You can just take the example and build it from there, and reduce it first to the bare minimum, and then start building it up. If you do that, you'll learn to code in Rexx. So there's an error here, and that's the beauty of it, by the way. So it found an error somewhere because there was an end, but it still worked. Very resilient. That's because it's Rexx. It's interpreted. It's not compiled, and so that still works just fine. If you want to go fix it, hello CGI. There's an end. Yeah, this end, of course, threw it off course. And okay, so again, and now no errors no more. Okay, very simple, very clean, easy way to do anything you want. A great way to experiment. I would warmly recommend it to you. You could do the same thing also on ZOS, but there of course everything is a little bit more complicated because you have Rexx, because you have complex setup of the web server, and execution of Rexx is in a slightly more complex environment than it is in ZVM. ZVM and Rexx kind of go together. Rexx was born, of course, on ZVM, and so a great way to have fun and spend a rainy autumn weekend doing something useful for your environment. Again, I will be linking to this repository here, so you can upload it to your machine and start playing within. It takes about 4 or 5 minutes to get this all running. I mean, literally, that's all it takes to have your own web server and your own Rexx CGI environments up and running. 5 minutes. If you follow this instructions here and the video we just looked at, you're going to be running no problems whatsoever. And so I'm going to be linking to this repository. If you have any fun Rexx scripts or maybe even some browser games that you can write in Rexx, please share them with us here as links below this video. If you have any questions how to get this running, or any questions regarding programming the CGI scripts in Rexx, please post comments below this video. And of course, if you like this video, I'm always glad to see the thumbs up button, because it's a great motivator for me. And please come back again to the Moshix Mainframe channel for future videos and much more fun with mainframes. Thank you, goodbye.